All right. I'll allow a few people to come on. All right, let's get started. So hi, everyone. I'm Susie Johnson with the National Capital Poison Center. Thank you for tuning in to our Facebook Live today. This is part of a monthly series of events in which our poison specialists discuss a variety of poison-related topics. So if you want to hear us discuss a specific topic, please comment and let us know. Today, we'll be hearing from Dr. Cathleen Clancy. She is a co-medical director at the National Capital Poison Center. She's also a practicing emergency medicine physician and associate professor at the George Washington University School of Medicine, and is a member of the Mycological Association of Washington, D.C. So she is very well qualified to speak to us about wild mushrooms today. If you, like me, have been wondering about the mushrooms popping up around your neighborhood, this one's for you. I want to invite you to type any questions you may have in the comments, and Dr. Clancy and I will keep an eye on those, and we'll try to answer those during the presentation. So without further ado, I will bring Dr. Clancy in. Hi, Dr. Clancy. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much, Susie. Well, welcome everybody. As you see, I am wearing a mask. I am at the Poison Center now. The National Capital Poison Center is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service. We answer phone calls from the lay public and healthcare professionals. And right now, all of our staff is at home, respecting the coronavirus. And so I am alone in the Poison Center. And so I will be able to take my mask off to talk to you. All right, so let's talk about mushrooms. Right now, there are many, many mushrooms coming up all over the place. Mushrooms especially love it when it's cool and wet. So right after a rain, if you look around, you'll find a lot of mushrooms. Now, if you're hoping that I'm going to tell you how to forage for edible mushrooms, you're in the wrong place. Because what I'm going to tell you is how to know that you can't tell the difference, and it's quite likely that you could find a poisonous mushroom while you're foraging. So just before this, I actually went out for a walk and looking for some mushrooms so I could show them to you. And I found a few. So let's start with the mushrooms I found, and I think they'll give you a little bit of an example of what I mean by it's really hard to identify mushrooms. So this was a mushroom. So I was looking for a fairy ring. I don't know if you've heard the term fairy ring. Fairy ring is when the mushrooms grow in a giant ring. It's usually in a grassy area. Have you ever wondered why that happens? Well, the reason is that the plant, the mushroom plant, is actually a disc-like plant that lives under the ground. And mushroom plants can be miles big. So they can cover miles under the ground. They're some of the biggest plants in the world. So a fairy ring is evidence that there's a mushroom plant under the ground and it's fruiting at the edges. So the mushroom is actually a fruit of the mushroom plant. And it tends to grow up around the edges. So it's called a fairy ring. People have this idea that there's something magical about this ring of mushroom fruits that are growing up. So anyway, I did indeed find a series of mushrooms growing a little bit around in a ring. So when you see that, you can sort of hope that they're probably from the same plant. Obviously, there's no rules. 2 mushroom plants could live in the same place and have their fruits near each other. But in general, we assume they're the same. And that's important because what I want to show you the most is that mushrooms change dramatically during their lifespan. So this is an adult mushroom. And when you look at it, the things you want to look at are the gills. So these are sort of free gills. I'll show you a picture later of pores, which are very different. And you have the cap, of course. Let's see, the light is a bit harsh on that. So you have the cap, and then sometimes you have a ring under here, or sometimes we'll call it a veil. This is the stem, or we'll sometimes call it a stipe. And then this is the bulb. So when you're identifying a mushroom, and I would highly recommend you do this with somebody who actually knows a lot about mushrooms, those are the things they talk about: the cap, the stipe, the veil, and the bulb, and where the mushroom grew. So this particular mushroom grew in a grassy area. So right along the edge of this ring of mushrooms also grew this mushroom. So if you look at these, you might say, oh, well, those are different mushrooms. I'm just going to tip this down a little bit so maybe you get a little more of the black of me there. Maybe you'd say, look, these are different mushrooms. You know, I mean, this one has a veil and this one doesn't. This one has a flat top and this one doesn't. Actually, these are the same mushroom at different times of their growth. If you see this one, it hasn't quite broken free of the veil. And so it looks kind of like a ball. I have one more from that same ring, which sort of shows how it's just breaking free of that veil. Same mushroom, looks pretty much the same. Okay, so I think you have the general idea that you cannot really tell one mushroom from the other easily because through their lifetime, they have different looks. Susie, can you put up that picture of the death angel? All righty. So over there, you see a series of little mushrooms that grow into a bigger mushroom. So those are all the same kind of mushroom. And you'll notice at the early part, they're very, very small and they almost look like a button. So we call those that's the button stage. And as they grow up, the mushroom gets bigger. This particular mushroom is exceedingly poisonous. The cap of one of these mushrooms can kill an adult. It's in the family of Amanita, and you might think, well, okay, well, I could learn to not eat that mushroom. But actually, there are quite a few mushrooms. There are some little brown mushrooms, and there are these other very white ones that, I don't know, look to me a lot like the ones we buy in the store. And they all have that same toxin in it. It's called amatoxin. And you eat that, and that toxin actually binds to your liver cells and destroys them. So if you eat a reasonable amount, you might not have a liver anymore. And the only real treatment would be to get a liver transplant. So you see why I don't pick mushrooms very much. And maybe you understand the old adage, there are old mushroom hunters and there are bold mushroom hunters, but there are no old, bold mushroom hunters. So you have to be super careful if you're ever going to hunt for edible mushrooms. Now, that being said, you don't have to eat everything you find. Looking for mushrooms is like looking for flowers. I mean, they are extraordinarily beautiful. I don't have a wide variety of mushrooms to show you, but if you go on a forest walk and you're very, very careful and you look everywhere, you will find a wide variety of beautiful mushrooms. Susie, maybe put the next picture up. I think this is one of the more beautiful mushrooms. This one is the Amanita Muscaria. Now, it's not an awesome picture of it, but you can sort of see, and I think it's the mushroom that everybody knows. It has a white stem and a red top, and then white specks on the top. And it's pretty much what everybody thinks about when they think about a mushroom. In fact, a poisonous mushroom. It's even in children's books like Barbar, and it theoretically is what killed the king of the elephants. So interestingly, this is a poisonous mushroom, and it is in the Amanita family, which is the same family as the ones we just looked at that I told you were so incredibly poisonous. But this is not quite as poisonous. This may give you vomiting, hallucinations, and will make you quite sick, but it probably will not kill you. So other beautiful mushrooms you'll have to find yourself. But I did have one other one to show you that I found when I was hunting. So you might get it in your head that all mushrooms have this nice little, cap and nice little stem, the way we showed you. But how about this one? This is another kind of mushroom. And I told you I'm not going to try and identify these because I don't want you to think that you're going to learn how to identify mushrooms. But this is also a mushroom, very, very different shape. I have a couple pictures here that I wanted to try and show you of even other mushrooms. This one I wanted to show you. I hope you can see it. See, take a look at the bottom of that yellow one. There are no gills there. So there are some mushrooms that have pores instead of gills. Remember, I showed you the bottom of this one? It had a lot of gills. Yeah, no gills. All right, that's one other type of mushroom. And then there are also shelf mushrooms, ones that grow out of trees. Those are also a kind of mushroom. And this is another one. This is a pretty common one that people actually forage for. Some varieties that look like that are called chicken of the woods. And people say they taste like chicken. I've tasted them. I think they kind of taste like wood. But, there's another one here I wanted to show you. So other mushrooms are puffballs. So there are some very large round mushrooms that don't even have stems. Some of them have spores like that inside. That blackness is a bunch of little spores. And a rare disease is people get those spores in their lungs if they breathe them, and they can actually grow mushrooms in your lungs. Not very nice. There are others that are solid. And then the last one I wanted to show you. Oh, maybe you can go to the next slide, Susie. So I wanted to show this to you because this mushroom, the very organized one, I don't know, the brown one. I don't know if I can tell you. Is it on your left or right? Interesting. Can you point, Susie, to which one it is? I can't point. Okay, so the Morel, which is the very orderly one, the picture with 3 mushroom, that is a Morel and is very tasty, people say. It's pretty easy to identify, and people commonly go hunting for that mushroom. The look-alike mushroom is the Gyromitra, which is on that other slide. And it kind of looks the same, but not really. But let me tell you, when you're out looking for mushrooms and you can't find the mushroom you're looking for, you get a little sloppy. And you can't find a Morel, It's been an hour, it's been an hour and a half. And suddenly you find this other mushroom that looks a little bit like a Morel. And then you say to yourself, okay, well, that's close enough. Only those other mushrooms are called Gyromitra. And they have in them a chemical called monomethylhydrazine, which isn't that important, but it does make you have seizures. Yeah, that's not good. So that's why I want you to, if you ever think about mushroom hunting, go with somebody who really knows what they're doing. And lest you think that you can use that picture to identify the Gyromitra, I just found you a couple other pictures just to sort of give you an idea of the range, the sort of, can you go back to me being big, Susie? There we go. So there's some pictures of Gyromitra. And then here's other pictures of Gyromitra. And here's other pictures of Gyromitra. So just like people, mushrooms look very, very different depending on what species they are, where they're growing, whether it's wet or dry out, whether it was wet or dry when their plant decided to fruit. Okay. So I haven't seen any questions come up. Does anybody have any questions for me about mushrooms? Have any of you ever gone picking mushrooms? There is a really great society here in Washington, D.C. called the Mycological Association of Washington. And they do have a website and you can become a member. And they actually right now are having virtual mushroom forays. They actually had one last night where their membership goes out, they pick mushrooms and they send in photos. And the mycologists that are part of that organization identify the mushrooms and, they have a meeting about it and you can watch online. So that's kind of fun. That's one way to learn more about mushrooms. I don't see any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Clancy. That was fantastic. I learned so much. I didn't realize how incredibly similar different mushrooms can look to each other, and how different the same mushroom can look from other of the same kind. So that's really, really important information to know.
The first time I went on a mushroom foray with these mycologists who are so wise about mushrooms, I was seriously blown away. I mean, they would have these discussions about the Latin name for this, that, or the other one and how it's changed and the names change and the mushrooms look different. And it's a whole field in and of itself.
That's amazing. We did get a comment I'm seeing from Renee Wolfius Johnson. What are the big white ones that are common in lawns?
What are the big white ones? That's these ones. So there are many different mushrooms that are big and white and grow on lawns. One of the common ones is called Chlorophyllum molybdites, and I'm sure the mushroom people would frown at my pronunciation. And it gives you horrendous vomiting and diarrhea. And interestingly, it has green spores. That's the chlorophyll, like chlorophyll that's in a plant. So if you were to take the cap of that mushroom and cut off the stem or the stipe, and then lay the cap down on a white piece of paper and cover it with a bowl, the next day, if you picked up the bowl, see, the mushroom doesn't like that when it's under a bowl. It thinks it's a very unfriendly environment, so it releases all its spores. And on the piece of paper, you would get a beautiful spore print as the spores fell from the cap onto your piece of paper. And for the Chlorophyllum molybdites, they would be green. And so you could be fairly
cool.
that it's a Chlorophyllum molybdites if you found it. And it is one of the really common mushrooms that grow on lawns. But so do the really poisonous ones, oh, by the way. They're also big and white.
Very cool. Thank you. I have a question. A couple of questions actually about poison control and mushrooms. So how frequently do people call, at least in the DC area, about mushroom concerns?
Pretty frequently. And in fact, one of the reasons we wanted to do this talk is for some reason in August, we've had like 5 times as many calls about mushrooms.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if it's because people are home because of coronavirus or because they got used to not going to the grocery store and so they want to get all their food from nature. But we've had quite a few calls about people eating mushrooms. And the call that kills me the most is the one where someone says, I'm driving along the road and, oh, I saw this big white mushroom along the road. So I stopped the car and I ate it. Am I seriously? That's the call. We get that a fair amount. We also get the toddler who took a bite of a mushroom. And sometimes we'll have a piece of that mushroom and we can try and identify it. Oftentimes people have eaten the mushroom. And then even though they give you another mushroom, it's kind of hard to be sure that it's the same kind of mushroom because you can identify the one they ate because they ate it.
It's gone. Yeah. Yeah. Great advice. We have a couple other questions that came in too. One is, what advice do you have for foragers?
My best advice is not to go picking mushrooms and trying to identify them, but to go out with a certain mushroom in mind and learn all about that mushroom, learn what the lookalikes are, learn there are sometimes little tests you can do. I know I am not a great mycologist and I don't go foraging for mushrooms to eat. at least not very many mushrooms, but there is a mushroom called a bolete, which is a pore mushroom. So it doesn't have gills, it has pores. And one of the ways of telling the safe ones from the not safe ones is to rub the stem. And if it turns blue, like if it gets a kind of a bluish bruise, that's not a good one. And so there are certain tricks like that to lookalikes of very safe mushrooms. And so if you spend time with somebody who really knows what they're doing, they can teach you those. And you could probably pretty safely forage for a few kinds of mushrooms, but don't ever go picking mushrooms and then come back with a book and try and figure out what they are, because that will not go well for you. You will get sick.
Yeah. Great advice. Thank you. And then one more, what mushrooms are common in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area?
Oh, there are trillions, trillions of mushrooms. I know that I've gone with the mushroom people and I've hunted for morels, and then I've found them in my own backyard. So I know morels are pretty common. We recently got a call from someone who hunted for chanterelles, and they seem to have a lot of them, as best I could tell from the picture. You know, tell them that they were correct. But so I think there are chanterelles in the area. And the people who go foraging, there are many, many kinds of mushrooms. If you go to one of those mushroom identifying lectures that I told you about, the virtual mushroom forages, you will be amazed at the variety. And in October, that group often has, well, we used to have a mushroom fair where everybody would bring mushrooms, like hundreds of mushrooms from the area, and the mycologists would identify them.
Oh, cool.
Tables and everything. I don't know what they're going to do this year. They might do it all virtually.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Clancy. Before we end, I just want to remind everyone that if you do have concerns about mushrooms, if, like we mentioned, your child took a bite out of one in the lawn, or you ate some unknown mushroom and you're feeling ill, you can call us or go online to Web Poison Control, and we can provide help 24/7. To close, please like and follow our Facebook page to get information on our upcoming Facebook Live sessions. And again, comment below or send us a message to let us know what topics you'd like to hear about in the future. Thank you again, Dr. Clancy, and thank you to everyone who tuned in today. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, everybody.